You are now listening to the Prescription for Purpose podcast, the go-to destination for women who are tired of feeling burnt out and stuck in the exhausting cycle of doing but not thriving. Each week, we'll provide you with Christ-centered mental wellness prescriptions to help you reclaim your peace, renew your purpose, and live life spiritually well. And if you're a therapist or a coach, the tools and insights that we curate here will help you make a Christ-centered impact on your clients today. Are you ready, sis? Let's get started. Hey, and welcome to another episode of the Prescription for Purpose podcast. If you were on YouTube, you're probably like, wait, girl, when you start doing video podcasts, I'm doing it today. Once I'm done with school, friend, I might be more consistent in doing it. But today, thank y'all so much for just pulling back up to this space. Last week on Saturday, we had a time in the society. But more importantly, my sinuses were having a time. And so I wasn't able to record, and I wasn't able to record yesterday. Okay, I got some medicine today, but I wasn't able to record yesterday. And so I'm giving a little razzle dazzle. Okay. And I'm going to do this week's podcast episode via video. So if you're listening to this, you can click the link in the show notes and you can watch this on YouTube as I record it. And today we're going to be talking about overcoming anxiety and overwhelm. I'm really excited about this topic. It is really overflow from a conversation and a lesson that I taught on Saturday in the society from our First Fruits fast, which shout out to you if you were one of the 150 women who pulled up on us for the 7 days. God really did his big one. People were giving their lives back to Christ. People had true transformation, strongholds broken. Like, it was everything that God said it would be. Okay. Love that for us. Amazing way to start the year. So if you're interested in being part of our community, you can click the link in the show notes and join us because it's good, friend. But we had a conversation where I talked about how God has already given us the prescription for mental wellness. Mental health and mental wellness are not the same thing. And I broke that down in the class that I taught. But more importantly, we have tools and have been given these sets of instructions to really protect our minds. And one that I feel like is often overlooked or not explained thoroughly enough is how to overcome anxiety and overwhelm. Now, in this episode, we are not talking about generalized anxiety disorder, although I do believe that the concepts taught here in the Bible are a great way that if you have that condition to really be able to not only do all of the clinical things, but to also deal with this spiritually as well. So when we say anxiety in this episode, I'm not talking about a misbalance between your neurotransmitters. That's what I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how we feel this angst and overwhelm, that worry that a lot of us are plagued with in the day to day if it's left unchecked, you may develop something like a generalized anxiety disorder, an obsessive compulsive disorder, if we don't check these things. Okay. And so the scripture that we're going to be coming from is a familiar passage, but just because it's familiar does not mean that God won't reveal something in this episode, because I guarantee you're about to learn something. Okay, get your notebook, friend, get your pen, and let's do the things. So in Philippians 4:6, Paul writes, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God." In the Greek, when you study this scripture, the word anxious in the Greek, I'm not going to try to pronounce it because I speak a little Spanish and no Greek. It means to be divided. It means to be distracted or pulled apart. And anxiety, really from a biblical perspective, is not simply about you feeling worry. There's a difference between you having concern or having a worry about something like, okay, right now in this very moment, as I record this, my aunt is having surgery. I care about that. I'm prayed, God, let her get through that. Amen. Right? Like you get what I'm saying? So I can care about things, but my job is to cast my cares unto the Lord. Whereas when we talk about being anxious, you are mentally fragmented. So my thoughts wouldn't be able, like, oh, I can't even do nothing else because I'm worried about this and worried about that and worried about that. Like that level of overwhelm that you feel is the anxiousness in which Paul is speaking about in Philippians 4 and 6. So listen to the definition again. This word anxious in the Greek means divided, distracted, or pulled apart. So it's not just about feeling worried, but it's about you having mental fragmentation. And so our thoughts are a lot of times stretched in multiple directions. And now we can't focus, we can't trust, and we can't find peace. And so a lot of us live in this divided state daily. You live here and you're frustrated because you feel like your communication with the Lord has been impacted. I'm praying, God, but I can't hear you. And this isn't even in my notes, but what did James tell us in James 1:5-8? That a double-minded man can expect nothing from God. So if I'm the enemy, why would I not put you in a state of mind where you are divided, pulled apart, and all over the place? Oh, because now I know that you no longer have access to your help because you're double-minded. You're all over the place. And so it's really important that we build a lifestyle to where we are able to not have this mental fragmentation. And a lot of us live like this every day and we don't realize it because society has conditioned us to normalize chronic stress, conditioned us to overcommit, conditioned us to worry about outcomes that are outside of our control. As human beings, our job is obedience. God's job is outcomes. Obedience, outcomes. Obedience, outcomes. It's above me. I did what I was supposed to do. It's above me now. Okay. Obedience is my job. The outcome is his portion or his burden of the work. So things like social media, your career, your family, cultural expectations, all of these things demand that we constantly perform. We constantly compare. We're constantly anticipating the needs of other people, the needs for the job, the needs for the business. And then the next thing we know, we're in this perpetual state of anxiety where we're constantly being divided. We're constantly overwhelmed. So when you wake up, you're not praying, you checking your phone. You're already reacting to notifications instead of getting your daily portion of grace and mercy from the Lord, right? You're overcommitting. You're saying yes because you don't want to disappoint, because you don't want to miss out. You are rushing through tasks because you don't want to fall behind. You're rushing, not giving good quality, and you would rather do that than trust the Lord to order our steps because we've been taught that we have to always reach and do. And then we oftentimes dwell in the what ifs instead of us dwelling in the presence of God and his sovereignty and his strength. And so that's this level of self-induced anxiety, because understand, this is not just the work of the enemy. We overcommit. The devil don't make you overcommit, friend. You overcommitted, you set up the layup, and the devil comes and dunks it in. Okay? So this is what we can control. So we have this self-induced anxiety, and it's often the result of misplaced trust. We lean onto our own understanding, right? Our own control, instead of really surrendering our needs to God. And so Philippians 4 and 6 is not just a suggestion. It is a way of life. And truthfully, when you study it, it is a command. The literary construct, when you read this, when you break it down, and we do this in my Bible studies in the society where we do what's called an expository teaching. So the software that I use, I pull it up on the screen. We go on line by line, verse by verse. And so this is what's called an imperative command. Do not be anxious. And so the structure and the way that this verse is written, it is very clear where we're told to refuse to do this. It's a command. That means we have a choice. If I can refuse to do something, I can either accept to do something or refuse to do it. That means that there is a choice in our angst. So that phrase, be anxious for nothing, is a command, the way that it's written in the Greek. It's not a suggestion. It is, no, you have to refuse to do this and keep refusing to do this. Don't entertain your mind's ability to try to take over and do this. And so for a lot of us, we find ourselves really struggling to get through the day to day. We find ourselves really dealing with a lot of invisible labor, which we'll talk about in another episode. We deal with all of this cognitive load, right? That overwhelms us. And so I want to give you 4 different positions or 4 different things that are dealing or causing you to have anxiety and overwhelm. And we're going to talk a little bit about like the underlying theory as well as some things that we have normalized in our society that are quote unquote productivity hacks that are really adding to your anxiety and overwhelm. These are things that we have normalized, but just because something is normal does not mean it is correct. Just because it's familiar does not make it right. And so I want us to talk about these different concepts so you can understand what you are really causing to happen in your brain, the physical organ, as well as you can identify some concepts to help you understand like, oh, I got to stop doing that. Right? I was dealing with this. I'm in school, I'm trying to keep up my content, we're in the society. I have so many things going on outside of this, so much spiritual warfare. Saturday, that lesson, the devil really tried it. The way in which he tried to leverage circumstance to get me to cancel that class, and didn't. Okay? Anyway, I want to give you guys this because as we go through the next couple of episodes, we're going to be building on this information. We're going to talk about really how to restore peace, order, and organization within our minds so that way we may live in a way that is peaceful despite our circumstances. So the first one is your cognitive load. If you're dealing with anxiety and overwhelm, we have a cognitive load problem. You are cognitively overloaded. And so your cognitive load is the amount of mental effort that is used working in working memory. And it's only so much that you have. Okay. So you have a total amount of mental effort that's used for working memory at one given time. So if you're a computer, there's only so much, so much RAM you got. And once it's gone, friend, it's gone. Same thing with your phone. And when you overload it, imagine when your storage is getting close, it gets slow and sluggish. A lot of us are doing that to our minds. Cognitive overload is going to reduce your cognitive efficiency. So the things that God's calling you to do, you're not going to be able to do as effectively. You're not walking in excellence. And so this theory of cognitive overload, it really just lets us know that the brain has finite working memory. So if you only got 128 gigs, friend, that's it. You can't ask for 129. Too much simultaneous processing will lead to overwhelm. And that's why you're mentally exhausted. That's why you can't get anything done. You are asking for more capacity than what you have. Remember that God has given each of us our own portion of capacity. Some 5, some 2, some 1, like the parable of the talents. Are you aware of your capacity? Are you overloading yourself? And so what happens is when you are working at a position of cognitive overload, there's increased stress and mental fatigue. There's poor memory retention and recall, and you have a reduced ability to problem solve. Most times, friend, you need to be able to solve problems, which is how you got here in the first place. And so now there's this perpetual cycle because you keep trying to do stuff, but your mind ain't right. You're overloaded, you're overwhelmed, and then you may get like me. Okay, when I feel like this, I will disconnect and avoid. That's not okay. But my brain just shuts down. Like, girl, just forget about it. I'm like, all right. And then come back. And so here are some common things, some common productive things that we do that lead to overwhelm or cognitive overload, rather. And I want you to identify if you see you in this, stop doing it. First, over planning. This used to be me. I would put 17 things on my planner to do for one day. No idea how much time each task is going to take, but I'm trying to get it all done. Now I have a maximum of 3 things, max. And most times I don't even get all 3 done. We cannot try to make our brains do things that they don't have the capacity for. It's too much. Some of you need to go down to the 3 rule max. Today I went to work. I'm going to do the laundry. I'm going to write a chapter of the book that God told me to work on. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. And you're still making progress. It's not practice makes perfect, friend. It's progress makes perfect. The other thing that we do, overcompensation of information. I told y'all about the book that I'm reading called Building a Second Brain. It is phenomenal. If you have not watched that YouTube video, I'll link it in the show notes here. But he talks about how we literally are so inundated with information that you have no time to think. You're overloading yourself. So you think that you're distracting yourself because you feel overwhelmed, but you're actually adding fuel to the fire because you're intaking more information. You are adding to your own overload. And then multitasking complex tasks. Okay? Handling deep work. And then in the middle, I'm going to respond to Slack and an email. No. I need my brain to focus. I need to do the deep work. I can respond to emails after this or before. The next issue or the next pillar of overwhelm and anxiety is attention residue. And attention residue is the lingering cognitive effect of a previous task, which then reduces the focus on the next task. As an ADHD babe, okay? Transitioning between tasks for my brain, she'd be like, no, go back, okay? My brain be giving Lot's wife. When it's time to move on, it is so frustrating sometimes. But today, as I was preparing for this, I said, oh, attention residue. Okay, I'm sorry, brain. Let me do better. All right. But attention residue, it comes from a theory where it essentially explains that each time a person switches tasks, a portion of our cognitive resources remains attached to the previous task. So then it impairs your brain's full engagement on the current task. I'm still thinking about the app over here, trying to record the podcast. If I'm still doing app stuff over here, my whole brain is not focused on the podcast. And that is problematic. So a lot of times you'll see decreased focus and slower task completion. There's a lot more mental exhaustion, and this makes increased likelihood for error. So something that we do, checking emails in between tasks. So when you break your deep work to read and respond to messages, you have thoughts that are unfinished. I have done this so many times. I have found sticky notes and I'm like, girl, what was the rest of the sentence? Who texted you or called you? Do better, friend. Context, switching between unrelated tasks, right? So alternating between creative work and administrative work. So you're writing a blog, you're in deep, you're doing the things, and then also trying to do invoices. No. This is why theming your days, having days where I'm like doing content creation versus doing admin stuff. This is why this is super helpful, because it literally is going to help reduce attention residue. And then jumping between different tasks. Okay? Keeping too many browser tabs open. I'm embarrassed to tell you sometimes how many tabs I have open. And then I look and I go, Charlotte, that's what your brain looks like right now. And we got to clean it up and shut it down. Sometimes I just close the whole laptop, throw it all away. The next pillar of overwhelm and anxiety is decision fatigue. So this is the decline in the quality of your decisions after you keep having to make a bunch of decisions, especially in a short period of time. Let me tell you something. One part that is really exhausting about working in clinic is because I make a ton of decisions every day, some big, some small. But even within the short time that I'm in clinic, the amount of decisions that I am making, what medication, what patient am I going to see next? If there's an issue that pops up, I need to decide what to do. Should I send this kid to the ER? Should I not? And then I come home. I tell my husband when I come home, please don't ask me what I want to eat for dinner. Pick something. Because I don't have not another thought to give. Okay. And so with the theory of decision fatigue, the brain has just simply a limited reserve. Again, a limited reserve of decision making energy each day. And so as your decisions start to accumulate, your cognitive resources are depleted. And now you are either impulsive, come on, ADHD, get it, or you're avoidant. Also me, depending on the day. I'm going to just do whatever, or I'm going to do nothing. But that is a sign that you are dealing with decision fatigue. So a lot of times, if you're dealing with this, you're going to have increased anxiety and procrastination, poor decision making. So you're either going to make really rash decisions. The Bible tells us that's not okay. Or you avoid things. Also not okay. Jesus said, let your yes be yes and your no be no. And then you're going to have an even higher bout of emotional exhaustion. And so one of the things that causes decision fatigue is overloading your to-do list. So again, you have these endless daily tasks and you don't prioritize those 2 to 3 key items, or you spend too much time on decisions that don't really move the needle. You're putting too much energy on whether you're going to wear a pink shirt or a blue shirt. Pick a shirt, put it on. Is it clean? All right, friend. When you waste that mental energy picking out outfits, choosing your meals, rereading emails before you write your response, like all of those many things, we have to do better. So one way that I try to reduce my decision fatigue, especially early in the morning before my brain has warmed up good and all of my neurotransmitters are appreciating my medication before that, the way that I'm able to survive that time is the night before I pull out my clothes. Now I don't have to think about what I'm going to wear. It's all right here. The end. The end. We have to start putting those things in place, those habits in place that we used to do, some of us as children, pulling your clothes out the night before. Because now when I get up in the morning, I don't have to start my day with making a decision. I can get up, pray, brush my teeth, do what I need to do, and decisions already been made. So a lot of that preparing for the next day, knowing like meal planning, all of these things are beneficial because it's going to reduce decision fatigue in the day to day. It really is. It really is. And then you want to make sure that you avoid making important decisions late in the day, right? So scheduling meetings, financial planning, goal setting, don't do that after you have spent your whole day making decisions on top of, for all my listeners that have kids out there, your kid's going to ask you 50 million and 11 questions. Okay. Sometimes 50 million and 12 on a day-to-day basis that you can't then after that say, oh, I'm about to work on my business. Friend, if by the end of the day, if that's not your peak time, don't do it. You can't make decisions that way. And then the last pillar of this overwhelm and anxiety is psychological fragmentation. So it's a state where your thoughts, emotions, and your identity all feel like they're pulled apart from each other because there is way too much excessive cognitive strain. You're just like, girl, I don't even know. Like, am I happy? Am I sad? What are feelings? Do I have a brain? That's that. And so this theory pretty much tells us that when our emotional and cognitive loads surpass our mental capacity, we then cause our brain, the organ of our brain, to start struggling to integrate information. And so now there is detachment. Now you feel dissociated. And you have a lot of increased anxiety, you feel disconnected, you feel scattered, you're unable to concentrate. And this is where you start seeing people in emotional exhaustion and burnout. And so you have to start putting some boundaries in place. If you're dealing with psychological fragmentation, if that is at the root of your anxiety, I need you to stop being available to everybody all the time. Let me tell you something that blessed me. Do not disturb. My phone on D&D right now. People will tell you. Sometimes it's a little tough to get a hold of me. I have to do that in this season. But you don't need to respond to everybody immediately. Always responding to texts, always responding to DMs, always responding to emails. You have to have boundaries, and boundaries aren't for you. People can call my phone whenever they want if they have my number. The boundary is for me. If I'm in the middle of something, Charlotte's not going to answer. If I'm in the middle of something, I'm not going to respond to the text. If I'm in the middle of something, I will look, your call will be responded to in the order in which it was received. That's what it is. The boundary is for me. Boundaries are for us. So what do you need to put in place? I have the Opal app on my phone. She can't open YouTube. She is me. That's a boundary for me. In certain times, I can't do that. If you are dealing with psychological fragmentation, you are overcommitting to your obligations. You cannot say yes to everything. You can't. There was this episode of SpongeBob that I'm thinking about where they opened up a hotel and it's like, we say yes to every request or something like that. Like, it was insane by the end of the episode. It was crazy. And that's what we look like. If you've never seen that episode, find it. Just type in like SpongeBob hotel episode. Watch how ridiculous the episode gets. And then look at your life. You say yes to any ridiculous thing, anything at all. I've had to learn that your emergency isn't my emergency. I can have empathy. I can have care. I can have concern. I'm going to give it to God. I'm going to cast my care. But that does not mean that I have to interject myself and be the solution to your problem. A lot of us live in this psychological fragmentation because we've been trained to be everybody's superhero, but we are not God. Even Jesus didn't heal every single body. He didn't go everywhere. He went where the Father told him to go. So we have to be prayerful and mindful before we say yes. Just because it's a good idea doesn't mean it's a God idea. And just because there is a need doesn't mean that God is calling you to fulfill that need. And then finally, working late in the name of productivity. Listen to me. I'm guilty. But if you're pushing through exhaustion, now there are times where God is calling you to move forward, even if you don't quote unquote feel like it. And I may share that Saturday because this just happened to me. I may share that Saturday in our bonus episode of like there's a difference between me persevering and me pushing through exhaustion. And the second is not healthy. So you have to learn how to really not overdo it. You're not respecting the mental capacity that God is giving you. So it's really important, again, that if you're dealing with anxiety and overwhelm, that you ask yourself, which of these 4 pillars am I dealing with? Am I dealing with cognitive overload? Am I dealing with attention residue? Am I dealing with decision fatigue? Do I feel psychologically fragmented? Is it a little bit all of it? And now we have to start taking some strategies to where we can resist anxiety. So, the Bible says, resist the devil and he shall flee. That's not passive. That don't mean run the other way. Okay? We have to understand that our definition of like productivity, like more tasks don't make you more productive. Your brain needs time to transition. So you're going from thing to thing to thing. You're going to be cognitively depleted and you're going to have fragmented focus. If you're overwhelming yourself with tasks, that's not productivity. What you're doing is increasing your anxiety. You're increasing room for mistake. You're increasing exhaustion and you're on your way. Okay, you're starting the cycle of overwhelm. You're starting the cycle of what I'm calling the idle mind, when your mind just burns out. IDLE. It just burns out. And it's just like, girl, we don't even care no more. Just forget it. We cannot live in a space, in a place where we're trying to grind. Think of something getting that's like ground beef. They take a whole muscle and then like make it mush. I'm about to grind. Why? I don't want my joints grinding together, and I don't want my brain being grinded either. So things that seem productive do not fall into the productivity phenomenon, and it's really a trap. There are some things that can really increase your productivity: time blocking, theming your days. But this whole like multitasking, over planning, that is doing more harm than good to your brain. And then I need you to rest, and I need you to have boundaries. I need you to rest, and I need you to have boundaries. Okay? And what I'm going to do to respect your cognitive load is I'm going to put a pin in it right here. I'm going to put a pin in this right here because I want you to really sit over the next week and identify, one, do I really deal with anxiety and overwhelm? Do I feel disconnected? Am I allowing myself to be divided? Now, when you see a notification pop up, you have to ask yourself, am I refusing to be divided, for my attention to be divided? Am I following the command to refuse? When you get ready to overplan, hold on. Am I refusing to bring myself anxiety? If you don't know how much time a task is going to take you, friend, that should be the only thing on your schedule. You don't know how much time it's going to take. A lot of us put all this stuff on our planner, and you don't really have an accurate idea of how you're stewarding over your time. Do a time audit. Identify where you are. Go read Philippians 4 and 6. When the Bible says be anxious for nothing, that doesn't mean that you can't care about anything. If you couldn't care, then Jesus wouldn't say cast your cares. See what I'm saying? It's, hey, do not allow anything to get you distracted, divided, or pulled in separate directions. I'm thinking about how they used to take people and like, what's one of them Roman, I don't know, weird torture things they used to do where they would tie your limbs to a horse and then tell the horses to go? That's how your brain looks, friend. We got to do better. We got to do better. I want us to consider the ways in which we are not allowing the Lord to really be our strength, where we have self-induced anxiety, and we have allowed the way that we live, the society, we have conformed to the ways of this world, and now we deal with anxiety. Anxiety steals your clarity, anxiety steals your confidence, and anxiety steals your closeness to God. Right? Remember that if you are double-minded, you can expect what? Nothing. Now it's this vicious cycle. You're overwhelmed because you have all this anxiety, you're being pulled apart. You go to God. Well, he said, if I have my faith in something other than him, that's where when you are divided like that, that means your faith is somewhere else. That's why the root of this is mistrust in God. So now you don't feel close to God. You feel like he doesn't love you. And here comes the enemy because he's musty. He's absolutely going to try to leverage that because all is fair in love and in war. And this is spiritual warfare. So now you already feel like that. And I'm going to come through and I'm going to whisper it in your ear. Or I'm going to send somebody that's going to really pull at that cognitive bias of yours to say, yep, see, God doesn't love me. And now you're down a whole spiral. Now you are off track. Now the spirit of deception has been successful in what it's supposed to do. When you study that in the Greek, the spirit of deception, it means to get, like, to take you away from, not just for you to lie, but I get you off course. And we allow that to happen when we don't check these things. And we have to refuse to allow anxiety. We have to refuse to allow our minds to take off. And so it really has to come down to you refusing to strive. I don't want to strive. I want to thrive. Thriving is not dependent on me. Thriving is simply dependent on me being attached to the branch, okay? And fruit will be produced. But striving is me pushing and trying to force things to happen. In Philippians 4:6, we are reminded that we don't have to live like that. Resist anxiety. That doesn't mean that you ignore it, but you replace it. You make a decision to do something else. Replace it with prayer. Replace it with boundaries. Replace it with trusting God. Replace it with you building adequate systems so you can really allow your mind to get the rest that it needs. So this week, I have a journal prompt for you. And it is, what is one anxiety that I have accepted as normal that God never called me to carry? Where did I learn to live this way? And what would it look like to resist this anxiety instead of entertaining it? Really take the time to sit down and reflect and ask God to demonstrate or to reveal to you your anxious thoughts. Psalm 139, David says, God, reveal to me my anxious thoughts. So that means he'll do it. Search me, O God, in Psalm 139. So go read Psalm 139. I don't think that's the first time I've given that homework here. And then I want you to think about this prompt. What is one anxiety that I've accepted as normal that God never said was mine to carry? What burden are you carrying that doesn't belong to you? The reason you feel angst and overwhelmed, friend, like you just about to fall out, is because you're carrying a burden, a cross that it does not belong to you. It's God's cross. He's in charge. So when I feel angst and overwhelmed, it is very clear to me that I've put down Charlotte's cross and I've decided that I was going to pick up the Lord's cross, and we are going to buckle under the pressure of that every time. We don't have the capacity. We just talked about how our brain doesn't have the capacity, but you know who does? Our Father. That's why in our weakness, his strength is made strong to us. We're able to know him in a new way when we actually allow for him to operate in the spaces where he has given us limited capacity. He created us. So he gave us just enough capacity. So to you, it's limited and you look at it as a bad thing, but he's like, that's all you need. That's all you need. He withholds no good thing. So allow him to be God. What thing have I accepted it as normal, but it's an angst? Where did I learn to live this way? And like, what would it look like for me to resist this anxiety instead of entertaining it? I pray that this bless you, friend. I love you. I'm excited to talk about our resistance strategy in our bonus episode this week. God bless you, and I'll see you next time.